Hi friends, sir, now the next topic what I want to explain, top 10 exceptions in exception handling. Sir, why I'm talking about this topic is there are two reasons are there. Sir, first one, in the interview room, if you are trying with experience, maybe a chance to ask in your previous project what are the most commonly raised exceptions what you experienced or what you faced. Sir, what exceptions you got in the previous project, you should be in a position to talk at least a few exceptions, right? Okay, next that is for interview room sake. Now the next possibility, being programmer, compulsory you people should have some clarity about the common exceptions. So that's why, so this topic is the very helpful for you to improve your coding level with respect to exception handling, right? So which 10 exceptions I want to discuss? Observe a bit very carefully, sir. So the first one, array index out of bounds exception. Next, null pointer exception, stack overflow error, class cast exception, no class ref found error, exception in initializer error, illegal argument exception, number format exception, illegal state exception, assertion error. Sir, total these are the 10 top 10 exceptions what I want to explain. Sir, the first one, observe a bit very carefully, sir. The first array index out of bounds exception. Sir, can you please observe array index out of bounds exception? Array index out of bounds exception is the child class of index out of bounds exception. Index out of bounds exception, which is the child class of runtime exception. Of course, this runtime exception is the child class of, have you remembered, right? Exception is the child class of exception, which is the child class of throwable. Now complete story. Array index out of bounds exception is the child class of index out of bounds exception. Index out of bounds exception child class of runtime exception, which is the child of exception throwable. Have you remembered, right? Runtime exception and its child classes are unchecked. That's why it is a unchecked exception. Compiler never going to worry whether you are handling this exception or not. Okay, so first point about array index out of bounds exception is it is unchecked exceptions, right? Okay, well, sir, when this exception will be raised, so the name itself indicates array index out of bounds exception. This exception will be raised automatically whenever we are trying to access array element with the out of range index. Regarding whenever we are trying to access array element with the out of range index, automatically this exception by default will be raised. Is it clear for all of you, right? Okay, sir, just observe. Let me go for a simple example, sir. I'm taking int array a is equal to neo int array of 10. Int array a is equal to new int array of 10. Sir, what is the size of this array? 10, sir. Now, what index is possible? 0 to 9. Here, total 10 elements are there. First element index is 0, 10th element index is 9. That's why, so the possible index is 0 to 9. Next, once we create an array, every element by default initializer with the default value. Sir, what is the default value for int type? 0, 0, 0, like this, right? Default value for int type is 0. Now, I'm trying to access SOP of A of 0. Regarding SOP of A of 0, A of 0. So, what is the element locating at the 0 index? 0, sir, it is perfectly valid, because it is a valid index, right? Now system.out.println a of 9, 9 is also valid index if the array size is the 10. Yes, what the answer? 0 we are going to get. Okay, so we are accessing array element with the valid index only, right? Suppose I'm trying to access SOP of a of 100, sir. Oh, what is the 100 index element? So for the size 10, 100 index is not possible. Immediately we are going to get runtime exception, array index out of bounds exception. Everyone can able to understand, right? So if you are trying to access array element with the out of range index, then we are going to get what? Array index out of bounds exception. Now system.out.println a of -100. Sir, whether it is the positive or negative, no problem. It is not in the range. Sir, valid range is 0 to 9 only. 0 to 9 only. Before 0, any negative value. After 9, any positive value. These two things will become what? Sir, out of range only. So, whether it is the -100 or whether it is the +100, it is out of range. That's why we are going to get same array index out of bounds exception. So, if you are trying to access array element with the out of range index, whether it is a positive number or negative number, no problem. We are always going to get array index out of bounds exception. Clear for all of you, right? Let me, can you please cross check? Have a look once, sir. So I want to execute a small example. Same, sir. Int array a is equal to new int array of 10, a of 0, SOP of a of 0, SOP of 9, a of 9 I am taking, sir. So 0 and 9 valid indexes only, because size 10 means 0 to 9, any index is acceptable. Now let me execute this code, sir. Here observe a bit carefully. The code compiles fine. The code compiles fine, no problem at all. Now I am trying to execute. What is the answer we are getting? 0, 0. Perfectly itself is acceptable. Okay. Now I am taking a of 100. A of 100. Immediately we are going to get, sir, runtime exception. No compile time error at all, because array index out of bounds exception is not a check. Compiler never going to consider whether you are handling or not. Sir, at runtime, I'm going to get array index out of bounds exception, sir, for index 100. Sir, need not be 100, sir. Even -100 also you can take. -100 also. Sir, you are going to get. So, there is no compile time error. Perfectly the code compiles fine. Now, array index out of bounds exception -100. Array index out of bounds exception -100 is the output we are going to get, sir. So, any explanation is required? Can you please confirm? Everyone in the position to understand clearly, right? Okay. So whenever we are trying to access array element with the out of range index, then we will get what? Array index out of bounds exception. That's all, sir. This is the first exception what you should aware. Sir, now the next one, second exception what I have to explain. Null pointer exception. The name itself indicates, right? Null pointer exception. Okay. Sir, when we are going to get this one, and whether it is a checked or unchecked. Do you know null pointer exception? Null pointer exception is the child class of runtime exception. Next, runtime exception is the child class of exception. Exception is the child class of throwable. Observe that, throwable. Now, do you know runtime exception and its child classes are unchecked? Already you aware? That's why null pointer exception is unchecked. Compiler never going to check whether you are handling this exception or not. Okay. Sir, when we will get null pointer exception? So, whenever we are trying to perform any operation on the null, are you getting? If you are trying to perform any operation on the null, then we are going to get null pointer exception. Okay. Very simple, sir. If I can consider string s is equal to Durga is there, sir. String s is equal to Durga is there. Now system.out.println s dot length I am asking, sir. S dot length. Hey, what is the length? What is the length of this string? Like this I am asking. What is the length? What is the length of this string? Like this I am asking, sir. Sir, if I can ask like what is the output we are going to get, sir? 5. How many characters are there? 5. Here string object is there. Length is a meaningful work, is going to work out. Suppose I am taking string s is equal to null. String s is equal to null I am taking. So it is a null. This string object is not available. Now system.out.println s dot length. S dot length. Remember, whenever we are trying to perform any operation on the null reference, then immediately we are going to get runtime exception, null pointer exception. Everyone, can you please explain when you are going to get null pointer exception? The most commonly raised exception in our programming, sir. Remember this one, in our projects, the most commonly raised exception is null pointer exception. On the null, if you are trying to perform any operation, then immediately we are going to get null pointer exception. Clear, right? Have a look once, sir. Observe a bit carefully. Here I am taking string s is equal to, here 1 minute, string s is equal to Durga it is. Now system.out.println s dot length, sir. Okay, s dot length like this I am taking, sir. So now what is the answer we are going to get? Perfectly itself is valid. Yes, the code compiles fine, the code runs fine. What is the answer we are getting, sir? 5. We are going to get 5 as the answer. It is the value. Suppose s is equal to null. S is equal to null. So on the null reference, we are calling length method. On the null reference, we are calling length method. Then what will happen is, do you know, we are going to get exception in thread main. What is that exception, sir? Null pointer exception. Everyone can able to understand, right? So when we are going to get null pointer exception, sir, on null reference, if we are trying to perform any operation, then immediately we are going to get null pointer exception. Clear? Sir, the next exception what we have to discuss, stack overflow error. Stack overflow error. Do you know stack overflow error is the child class of, just observe very carefully, sir. Stack overflow error is the child class of virtual machine error. Okay, VM, virtual machine error. Sir, this VM error, virtual machine error, is the child class of error, which is the child class of throwable. Okay, just observe. Now, sir, do you know error and its child classes are unchecked. That's why stack overflow error is unchecked, sir. Need not be this error. Any error is always unchecked. Compiler never going to ask how you can handle this exception, whether the programmer handling or not. Compiler never going to check stack overflow error. Okay, well, sir, when we are going to get this one? So the first point is very clear. It is unchecked, sir. Sir, now when we are going to get this one? Stack overflow. The stack is going to overflow, sir. When? So whenever we are performing recursive method call, have you remembered whenever we are performing what? Recursive method call. For every method, one entry will be stored in the stack. Recursive method call means that calls never going to end. At certain point, stack is going to overflow. Then obviously we are going to get what? Stack overflow error. Sir, I will explain with an example. Don't worry, sir. Here observe that I am taking a class test. Listen very, very carefully about this one. I am taking class test. Sir, public static void m1 method is there. Are you getting? I have one method is there, m1. This m1 method internally calls m2. Public static void m1 internally calls m2. Now public static void m2 internally calls m1. Oh, observe carefully, sir. m1 calls m2, m1 calls m2, m2 calls m1. Are you getting a recursive method call, right? Sir, now public static void main method, I am taking string array args. Public static void main string array args. Now my target is, sir, here take very, very special care. I am calling m1. From the main I am calling m1. Now the point here is, sir, do you know in this program how many threads are available? Respond, man. How many threads are available? By default, every Java program contains only one thread. What is that thread? Main thread. For every thread, JVM is going to create one runtime stack. I hope you may ever write. JVM will create what? One runtime stack. This is called a runtime stack for the main thread. Runtime stack. Okay. Now, every method call performed by main thread, performed by this thread, will be stored here. Okay. First, which method will be called by main thread, will be executed by main thread, is the main method. Are you getting main method? That's why. So, for the main, one entry will be stored, sir. Main one entry will be stored. Main internally calls M1. Main internally calls M1. So, that's why for M1, one entry will be stored. Now, M1 internally calls M2. For every method call, one entry will be stored in the stack M2. Sir, for again M2 again calling M1. M2 again calling M1. So, M2 calls M1. M1 calls M2. M2 calls M1. Okay, dot dot dot. At certain point, this stack is going to overflow. Then immediately we are going to get stack overflow error. Sir, what is the exception we are going to get? Of course, sir, runtime error. Exception in thread mean. What is that, sir? Stack overflow error. Okay, this is. So, when you will get a stack overflow error, sir? If there is a recursive method call, then there is a possibility of stack overflow error. Sir, let me execute this code. Have a look once, sir. Observe carefully about this one. Here I am taking, sir, now forget about this. I have one method is there, public static void M1 method. Okay, like inside M1 I am calling M2. Okay, M2 method, right? Same M2, sir, internally calls M1. M2 internally calls M1. Now observe a bit carefully, sir. Here M1 calls M2. M2 calls M1. Okay, it is the recursive, sir. Now here I am taking, sir, just I want to call M1. I want to call M1. Now observe a bit very carefully. There is no compile time error. Happily the code is going to be compiled. Now I am trying to execute, sir. If I am trying to execute, now have a look once. Exception in thread main java.lang.stack overflow error. Okay, stack, sir, M2 called by M1 called by M2 dot 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 dot. This cycle by default will be there. I hope everyone in the position to understand when you are going to get stack overflow error. If a recursive method call is there, then there may be a chance of stack overflow error. Clear?